years, Mexico's war against powerful drug cartels has tested the limits of law enforcement and military strategy. But as cartel groups grow smarter, using drones, armored vehicles, and even homemade submarines, the fight has taken an unexpected turn. Now, whispers of U.S. military involvement have stirred global attention. Could America's most advanced naval aircraft carrier actually be used in this battle? And what would it mean if the skies over Mexico became a new kind of war zone? Join us as we uncover how the U.S. Navy's genius air strategies could reshape the war against Mexico's cartels. When Claudia Sheinbaum became Mexico's first female president on October 1st last year, her toughest challenge was far from politics. Just months before her inauguration, reports surfaced that major Mexican cartels were showing off advanced weapons, including the American-made FGM-148 Javelin missile launcher, a system powerful enough to destroy tanks or bring down helicopters. 2 Javelins were reportedly seized from a cartel, and a recent helicopter crash that killed a security chief may not have been an accident. A former Mexican mercenary claims the crash was caused by a Javelin strike, and forensic experts say the weapon fragments recovered match that missile's signature. Armed with heat-seeking launchers, miniguns, and landmines, over 2,800 of which have been found since 2018, the cartels now resemble well-equipped militias rather than street gangs. For almost 20 years, Mexico has been locked in a brutal war with powerful drug cartels. Despite heavy crackdowns and military raids, the violence only evolved. Streets have turned into battlegrounds where law enforcers and civilians are caught in the crossfire and have also become targets. Since the government declared war on the cartels in 2006, more than 460,000 people have lost their lives. The cartels are deliberately flaunting their firepower to send a message to President Claudia. They're ready to fight anyone who challenges their power. With the U.S. lawmakers already calling for military intervention across the border, this move could spark an even bloodier conflict. The United States has long been involved in Mexico's fight, seeing it as part of its own war on drugs. Washington has spent billions helping Mexico strengthen its police and military forces, update its justice system, and invest in projects meant to reduce illegal migration and joblessness, which was the root of the crisis. On the border, U.S. agents are always working around the clock to block the flow of drugs streaming north. Now, with violence surging once again, President Claudia Sheinbaum faces a harsh reality, and that is, Mexico's war has become a fight not just for territory, but for survival itself. As the chaos deepens, attention naturally shifts north of the border. Many wonder how far the United States might go to contain the violence threatening to spill across. Washington has the tools and the experience to strike hard and fast. Yet the question isn't about capability anymore, but consequence. The U.S. military has shown it can carry out dramatic strikes far from home. Recent operations against groups in the Middle East prove that high-tech air power can reach deep into enemy territory and reshape a fight quickly. But copying those moves in Mexico would be dangerous for reasons that matter to planners and troops alike. Distance and politics all change the rules. Attacks on facilities thousands of miles away let the U.S. act where the local state is weak or absent. When a country has little control, a short, sharp strike can remove a threat without dragging in local politics. In Mexico, that model breaks down. The two countries share a long, populated border, and Mexico is a functioning state. Military action there risks pulling the Mexican government and its people into an open conflict on their soil. One key danger is blowback. Foreign strikes sometimes trigger limited revenge or bargaining by the target, calculated to avoid wide war. But cartel networks are different. They are criminal businesses with many armed cells, local influence, and a deep grip on communities. Kill or capture one leader, and others scramble to fill the gap. That scramble often sparks internal wars, bloody reprisals, and new crime tactics. Planners cannot predict how cartel bosses, lieutenants, or rival groups will react once pressure rises. Scale matters too. In past Mideast operations, the target and objective were clear: stop missile launches, slow a nuclear program, or protect shipping. Some of those goals could be tied to a single well-planned strike or a limited campaign. Against cartels, targets are diffuse: labs, airstrips, cash flows, and hidden networks spread across towns and terrain. Destroy enough of that network, and you risk creating a long-term security vacuum where smaller gangs flourish and violence spikes. There is also the question of proximity and consequence. A 2,000-mile common border is not a buffer. Violence in northern Mexico spills into U.S. towns, trade routes, and migrant flows. Heavy-handed operations on Mexican soil could make large parts of the border zone hard to govern, repeating the chaos seen during past crackdowns. That chaos included assassinations, mass killings, and a rise in homicides, outcomes that don't serve either capital. Domestic politics and public opinion feel the sting too. Open U.S. military action in Mexico would divide opinion at home, fuel protests, and strain relations with an ally. It could also draw in hostile outside actors who see an opportunity to distract the United States and expand their own reach by supporting or exploiting the violence. Smart response needs planning beyond a single missile shot. Military planners must map likely cartel counter-moves, protect civilians, and prepare for messy, follow-on effects. That means combining law enforcement, targeted strikes if ever needed, intelligence work, and support for the Mexican state, not a unilateral invasion. A strategy should aim to keep Mexican institutions intact while degrading criminal power without opening a new front of violence. This evolving battlefield demands more than ground tactics. It calls for innovation in every domain. As cartels expand their reach and weapon sophistication, the lines between crime and combat blur faster than ever. The threat now extends beyond checkpoints and safe houses, pushing the conflict into a new dimension, one that involves sophisticated military technology like the USS Gerald R. Ford. The Pentagon sent shockwaves through the defense world when it announced that the United States would deploy its most advanced aircraft carrier, the USS Gerald R. Ford, to the Caribbean. The move marked a major escalation in the Trump administration's campaign against Latin American drug cartels, a deviation from targeting boats at sea to preparing for possible strikes on land. The Gerald R. Ford is the crown jewel of the U.S. Navy, a floating fortress carrying stealth fighters, advanced radar, and a full complement of support ships. As the carrier wrapped up its Mediterranean deployment, it was redirected toward the coast of Venezuela. Defense officials said the goal was simple: to increase America's reach and firepower in one of the world's busiest drug trafficking corridors. The carrier strike group isn't just a show of strength. It brings dozens of F-35 fighter jets capable of stealth attacks and precision strikes. These aircraft could neutralize enemy radar and air defense systems in Venezuela, clearing the path for U.S. Special Operations Forces or drones to move in and hit ground targets. The F-35 Lightning II isn't an average fighter jet. It's more like a flying computer built for future wars. Designed to slip past radar, outsmart enemy defenses, and strike deep behind enemy lines, it's meant for showdowns with major powers like China or Russia. But lately, this high-tech stealth jet has found itself in a very different kind of fight, against drug cartels. In mid-September 2025, Marine F-35Bs from Fighter Attack Squadron 225 touched down in Puerto Rico. Their arrival kicked off a U.S. military campaign in the Caribbean aimed at crushing drug smuggling routes that feed America's drug crisis. Backing them are roughly 1,900 sailors aboard the USS Iwo Jima and its support ships, along with over 2,000 Marines from the 22nd Marine Expeditionary Unit, the F-35 Lightning II, which has already been deployed in other regions. Whether the U.S. would ever make that same move in Mexico, however, remains uncertain. Still, the sight of an F-35 or an aircraft carrier in the fight against drug cartels has sparked debate. Why use a $100 million stealth jet to chase smugglers in speedboats? And would it be generally effective in the war against these masterminds? The cartels may be ruthless, but they don't exactly have radar systems or fighter aircraft. Critics call it overkill, a luxury tool used for a low-tech mission. A Pentagon official, however, insists it's all part of a wider homeland defense plan. The department has a range of capabilities to defend against threats, like narco-terrorists, and Secretary Hegseth deploys the forces needed to meet the president's security goals. In other words, when the White House calls for results, the Pentagon sends its best. But not everyone is convinced. Richard Abulafia, a veteran aerospace analyst, believes the F-35 isn't the right fit for this kind of job. He explained that the F-35 shines when there's real danger from enemy air defenses or hostile jets. Otherwise, it's just expensive flying hardware. His point makes sense. These jets were built to take on advanced threats, not smugglers with outboard motors. So why would anyone even consider using such a weapon against drug traffickers? Some argue it's about showing force or testing new tech in unconventional missions, but many within defense circles think it's wasteful. The F-35 is designed to go head-to-head with enemy nations, not chase pickup trucks through jungles or coastal routes. Each flight hour costs tens of thousands of dollars. Maintenance is complex, and the plane's systems are tuned for war zones filled with surface-to-air missiles, not low-level smuggling routes. Using an F-35 for anti-cartel missions would be like sending a Formula One car to deliver mail. Impressive, but completely impractical. There's also the issue of risk. Every time an F-35 takes off, the Pentagon watches closely. Losing one would be a major blow, not just in cost, but in classified technology. Its stealth coding, targeting systems, and onboard computers are all top secret. No one wants those falling into the wrong hands because of a mission that never needed it. Instead, many believe the U.S. should rely on aircraft better suited for that kind of fight, like drones, surveillance planes, and older attack jets that can patrol for longer without burning through millions. These tools fit the mission's scale, leaving the F-35 where it belongs, preparing for the kind of battles only it can win. So when talk arises about using the F-35 in the cartel war, the question isn't whether it could, it's whether it should. Because when a plane built for the world's toughest wars gets dragged into small conflicts, it's not just the jet that's being misused. It's the very idea of what air superiority is meant to stand for. That dilemma mirrors Mexico's own long struggle, powerful tools and the same haunting outcome. No matter how the strategy shifts, the battlefield keeps evolving, and the cartels keep adapting. Mexico's war against the cartels has stretched across 4 presidencies, each promising a new way to end the bloodshed. Yet from soldiers in the streets to softer hugs, not bullets policies, the results have been painfully similar. New gangs, more violence, and a nation still trapped in conflict. When Felipe Calderon took office in 2006, he launched what became known as Mexico's War on Drugs. Almost overnight, soldiers filled the streets. Tens of thousands of troops were sent to fight cartels and take down corrupt police forces. Backed by U.S. intelligence and funding, Calderon's forces hunted down major drug lords, killing or capturing 25 of the country's 37 top cartel bosses. To many, it looked like a bold step toward victory. But the strategy came at a heavy cost. When the big bosses fell, their lieutenants turned on each other. The once powerful cartels split into dozens of smaller, more violent factions, each fighting for control. Mexico's murder rate skyrocketed. Over 120,000 homicides were recorded during Calderon's 6-year rule, nearly twice the number under his predecessor. Critics said the military wasn't trained for police work, and communities caught in the crossfire paid the highest price. In 2012, Enrique Peña Nieto took power with a promise to change direction. He said his goal was to protect civilians and businesses rather than chase down cartel leaders. Still, he couldn't break Mexico's reliance on the military. His government formed a new paramilitary-style national police force, hoping it would fill the gap between soldiers and local police. At first, things looked better. Violence dipped slightly in his early years. But by 2015, the bloodshed returned. Cartel rivalries deepened as the old kingpin strategies fallout continued. By the end of Peña Nieto's term, Mexico hit its highest homicide rate in modern history. Fragmented gangs and territorial wars turned entire regions into battlegrounds. Then came Andrés Manuel López Obrador, better known as AMLO, in 2018. He rejected the all-out military approach, saying Mexico needed hugs, not bullets. His plan was to fight the root causes of crime by improving education, creating jobs, and reducing poverty. He also pledged to tackle corruption, seize cartel money, and ease tensions with communities trapped in cartel zones. But in practice, AMLO's government still leaned on the military. He created a new security force, the National Guard, led by soldiers. Critics said this blurred the line between police and army once again. While AMLO's rhetoric was softer, cartel violence stayed high, and many Mexicans saw little change in their daily lives. Reports linking his circle to cartel money further eroded trust. and U.S.-Mexico relations grew strained. Families of the disappeared, victims lost to the drug war, accused him of protecting the same forces they blamed for the violence. By 2024, Claudia Sheinbaum stepped in as Mexico's first female president, inheriting the same war that had outlasted every leader before her. She promised to continue AMLO's hugs not bullets vision, but add sharper intelligence and investigative work to track organized crime. Her administration quickly scored a symbolic victory, the largest fentanyl seizure in Mexican history. But the violence didn't stop. Killings and territorial disputes still plague much of the country. Sheinbaum has urged the United States to step up cooperation and share more intelligence to combat the flow of weapons and synthetic drugs. Yet many observers fear Mexico may be caught in a cycle that new presidents can't easily escape. Old tactics dressed in new language. From Calderon's full-scale war to Sheinbaum's softer tone, every strategy has tried to strike at the cartel's heart. But each one, whether through force or reform, has faced the same reality. The cartels adapt faster than the government. Their power is woven into the country's economy, politics, and communities. 2 decades on, Mexico's drug war remains a story without an ending. But just as Mexico struggles to find its footing, new pressure is building north of the border. In Washington, powerful voices are calling for a tougher approach, one that doesn't just cross diplomatic lines but threatens to redraw them entirely. From the moment Donald Trump stepped back into power, talk began swirling among his inner circle about taking military action against Mexico's drug cartels. To them, the problem of fentanyl and cross-border crime called for a show of force. But behind the tough talk lies a dangerous gamble, one that could turn a fight against crime into a full-blown disaster for both nations. For years, Trump has been known for pushing limits in foreign policy. His second term has only amplified that pattern. He distanced the U.S. from longtime allies, questioned NATO's strength, and rattled global trade with new tariff battles against Canada and Europe. Now Mexico seems to be the next target on his list, not as a trading partner or neighbor, but as a potential battleground. Some of Trump's closest allies have openly suggested sending U.S. troops into Mexico to crush the cartels, especially after certain groups were labeled as foreign terrorist organizations. That classification would make military action legally possible, but at a steep diplomatic cost. For Mexico, such an act would be nothing short of an invasion. For the U.S., it would mean crossing a line that could reshape America's image in the entire region. The question in Washington has quietly shifted from, will it happen, to what would it look like if it did? Would it be a targeted strike, a long-term deployment, or something even bigger? With Trump's unpredictable style, all options seem open. Yet history offers a clear warning. When America takes its wars abroad, the results are rarely clean, quick, or controllable. Look back at Vietnam, Iraq, and Afghanistan. Each started with confident promises and ended with mounting losses and political chaos. Mexico would be no different. In fact, it might be worse. The U.S. tried something similar before. In 1916, General John Pershing led a mission into northern Mexico to capture the revolutionary fighter Pancho Villa after his raid on New Mexico. The mission failed miserably. Villa slipped away, and instead of weakening him, the invasion turned him into a national hero. Mexicans united behind him, viewing him as a symbol of resistance against American aggression. A modern-day invasion would almost certainly have the same effect. Instead of dividing the cartels, it could unite them, along with millions of Mexican citizens, under a common cause, defending their homeland. President Claudia Sheinbaum's government, which already leans heavily on messages of national pride, would use the crisis to rally support and strengthen its position. Anti-American sentiment would surge, making future cooperation nearly impossible. Diplomatically, the fallout would be devastating. Latin America has long viewed U.S. interventions with suspicion, and a military strike on Mexico would confirm those fears. It would push neighboring countries further from Washington's influence and closer to global rivals like China and Russia, who are eager to expand their footprint in the region. America's credibility as a partner would crumble. Even the fight against the cartels would suffer. Current joint operations between U.S. and Mexican agencies depend on intelligence sharing and coordination. A military move would destroy that trust overnight. Without Mexico's cooperation, America would lose vital access to cartel networks, safe house intel, and cross-border smuggling routes. The very thing the U.S. wanted to stop, the flow of drugs and violence, could actually grow worse. The U.S. has declared war on Venezuela, and they did not see it coming. Operating a drug lab can be lucrative, but when the U.S. is involved, it's a whole different story. Venezuela's most feared cartel gang, the Tren de Aragua, has been operating a successful drug lab. But judgment came in May 2025, when a powerful U.S. airstrike shook the gang-held territory in a never-seen-before attack. What exactly is behind this mysterious strike? And is the U.S. prepared for the consequences? Join us as we unveil how the U.S. Navy dropped the hammer on Venezuela and wiped a cartel drug lab off the map. Trump has made cracking down on drug cartels a central goal of his administration as part of a wider effort to limit migration and secure the U.S. southern border. In recent months, they have already deployed at least 2 warships to help in border security efforts and drug trafficking. A few months back, the administration designated Mexico's Sinaloa cartel and other drug gangs, as well as Venezuelan criminal group Tren de Aragua, as global terrorist organizations, showing just how serious they are in wiping cartels off the face of the earth. Not long after the terrorist designation, Donald Trump authorized the Pentagon to carry out military operations against what his administration calls narco-terrorist networks in Latin America. On paper, it's a counter-narcotics policy. The directive allows the U.S. to target groups unilaterally labeled as both criminal and terrorist. Once that designation is made, the military can operate without the consent of the targeted country, a move that violates international law. In a region with a long history of U.S.-backed coups, covert wars, and destabilization campaigns, the risk of abuse isn't hypothetical, it's inevitable. While the order applies across Latin America, Venezuela stands at the top of the list. The Trump administration has accused President Nicolas Maduro's government of working with transnational cartels and has doubled the bounty on him to $50 million. That's double the bounty for Osama bin Laden. Just recently, the U.S. Air Force dropped the hammer on Iran. They've also had significant activities with the Mexican cartels and Yemen Houthis. Now, Venezuela has also received a huge blow. But before that, let's see who is behind the massive drug trafficking in Venezuela. Drug trafficking in Venezuela has been going on for a very long time, and it has been a major headache to world leaders. For years, the U.S. has accused high-ranking Venezuelan officials of drug trafficking. Today's accelerating drug trade is a symptom of the urgent need for cash inside Venezuela's crumbling hyperinflation economy and rampant corruption among the Maduro government's senior officials. Multiple officials said. Colombian officials who would rarely be quoted on the record also said that the drug smuggling has recently involved Colombian leftist guerrilla group ELN, working with the Maduro military. In 2017, former Venezuelan Vice President Tarek El Aissami was sanctioned by the U.S. Treasury for overseeing or partially owning narcotic shipments of over 1,000 kilograms from Venezuela on multiple occasions. In March, El Aissami, now Venezuela's Minister for Industry, was indicted in New York for facilitating drug trafficking. In May 2018, Diosdado Cabello, the leader of Venezuela's National Constituent Assembly and embattled President Nicolas Maduro's number 2, was also sanctioned for being directly involved in narcotics trafficking activities. He has replied there is no evidence of his involvement in trafficking and set of sanctions against him in general. If there are persecuted politicians, those are the Venezuelan officials sanctioned by the U.S. You can keep your sanctions. Many other Venezuelan officials have faced similar U.S. accusations, which the Venezuelan government has outright rejected. They did not comment on this report despite several requests, but the U.S. still believes President Maduro is behind the main gang in the country. Venezuela's scramble for cash, owing to hyperinflation caused by economic mismanagement, has led to an increase in the risks taken by pilots. Another U.S. official said they were often former commercial airline pilots who used to fly passenger jets. 30 planes have roughly crashed in the last 3-month period, according to some reports, said one U.S. official. The scale of the operation was confirmed by a government official in the region who said the flights use around 50 clandestine runways in the northwestern region of Zulia in Venezuela. The drug cargo planes usually fly with the transponders that emit a signal identifying them to radar systems switched off. As the Venezuelan government has chosen to shield cartels, the U.S. acted. In May 2025, the U.S. stationed a Navy carrier group in the Caribbean to provide maritime surveillance, electronic warfare, as well as interdiction capabilities. FA-18s and EA-18s Growlers jammed Venezuelan radar and communications, paving the way for the Air Force B-52 Stratofortress to deliver GBU-72B bunker-busting bombs on fortified cartel-run warehouses, hangars, and clandestine runways. As night fell over northwestern Venezuela, the Caribbean waters swayed with the gentle wind that signals the end of the day. The moon reflected off the water, hiding the movement of the U.S. naval force. From the USS Harry Truman, the FA-18s and EA-18s Growlers were ready to wreak havoc on the cartel's intelligence. The radar operators on the carrier had eyes on every vessel that may attempt to leave the Venezuelan shore, while P-8 Poseidons circled high above, scanning for unusual activity along the coastline. Away from the shore, the targets were already mapped. They were clandestine runways hidden in the dense forest of Zulia and a lab storing ridiculously large shipments of cocaine said to be under the control of the Tren de Aragua. The B-52 stationed in a nearby base received live feed from the Navy, exposing the location of these facilities, and it was time to act. The said lab was located beneath the surface, under thick layers of hardened concrete with reinforced steel surrounded by other facilities that could make one ignore the lab itself. But it's not so easy to escape the military intelligence of the U.S. forces. The combined forces stayed patient until 3 a.m. The first bomb dropped. The GPU-72B penetrated meters of reinforced concrete, treating hardened surfaces like child's play, and reaching the facilities in seconds. Inside the heart of these facilities, detonations rang out loud as explosions rocked the jungle canopies, sending smoke and ash into the night sky. Meanwhile, Navy pilots flew cover over the coast, intercepting any small aircraft attempting to flee the targeted zones. Their electronic warfare systems jammed cartel communications, leaving the traffickers blind and isolated. The synergy between air and sea was flawless. While bombers leveled the bunkers, the Navy ensured no reinforcements or escape routes were available. In only a few minutes, multiple cocaine shipments were destroyed, secret runways rendered unusable, and cartel operatives were in full retreat. In Washington, Pentagon officials monitored the operation closely. Satellite feeds and drone footage streamed live to the Situation Room. That was fast, but it was only the first strike. Naval intelligence identified additional storage sites inland, and the Air Force, supported by Navy drones, was ready to deploy precision munitions again. Having received the precise locations, the pilots of the FA-18s and EA-18s Growlers, who were already perfectly positioned to rain down hell, deployed more GPU-72B with surgical accuracy. The bombs ignored all the defenses of the facilities, treating them like sandcastles. If the cartel members had been informed that what took months for them to build would be razed down in a matter of minutes, they may have just scoffed at it, but it happened right before their eyes. Their years of hard work were reduced to ashes. With a bomber that powerful, the cartel abandoned any thoughts of retaliating against the joint forces of the Navy and Air Force. You need to save your life first to be able to fight anyway. By dawn, the region was already as silent as a graveyard. The jungle that served as cover for drug activities was now littered with the remnants of cartel operations. Venezuelan authorities had been caught completely off guard, and the nerve centers of Tren de Aragua were temporarily paralyzed. That brings us to the GPU-72B. Just how powerful is it? Developed under the Advanced 5,000 Pounds Warhead Program, the GBU-72B was recently tested by being dropped from an F-15E Strike Eagle at Eglin Air Force Base in Florida. This new bomb is a significant evolution in U.S. bunker-busting capability, offering a powerful alternative between the 2,000 pounds GBU-31 JDAM and the massive 30,000 pounds GBU-57B massive ordnance penetrator, which only the B-2 Spirit can carry. Visually, the GBU-72B resembles an enlarged JDAM, but is fitted with long fins or strakes for stability and features a modified JDAM tail kit that includes a GPS-assisted inertial navigation system. Unlike the older laser-guided GBU-28B, the GBU-72's GPS INS guidance allows it to operate in all weather conditions, including through cloud cover, dust, and smoke. This increases both its flexibility and the survivability of the aircraft deploying it, as the strike platform can remain at a safe distance. The bomb is designed to be compatible with both fighters and bombers, providing more mission versatility than larger bunker busters. The exact depth the GBU-72 can penetrate before detonation has not been officially disclosed. However, its program manager has stated that its lethality is expected to be significantly greater than that of older weapons like the GBU-28. While performance details of later GBU-28 models remain classified, the original versions could reportedly break through 150 feet of earth and more than 15 feet of reinforced concrete. Currently, the U.S. Air Force's B-1B Lancer and F-15E Strike Eagle are confirmed platforms capable of deploying the GBU-72B. The GBU-72B is expected to significantly outperform legacy weapons like the GBU-28B. Its enhanced capability and precision make it ideal for use against fixed, deeply buried military targets such as missile silos, command centers, and weapons depots, especially in future conflicts with countries like Iran or North Korea. The Air Force used advanced modeling and simulation in the development of the GBU-72B, enabling faster production of test-ready prototypes and allowing earlier involvement from operational units in the design and feedback process. With this new bomb, the U.S. gains a crucial mid-tier precision strike option capable of handling hardened threats without the logistical and strategic limitations of deploying the much larger MOP. Historically, the GBU-72 underwent extensive tests at Eglin Air Force Base. Ground tests involved detonating the bomb's warhead inside a barrier array to measure its blast effects. From July to October 2021, airborne tests were conducted to ensure the bomb could be safely released and guided using a modified tail kit originally designed for the smaller 2,000-pound JDAM. The flight test series began on July 23, 2021, with 3 drops planned by the 781st Test Squadron and executed by the 40th Flight Test Squadron. These tests confirmed that the modified JDAM tail kit could successfully guide the much heavier 5,000 weapon. The final flight of this initial phase took place on October 7, 2021, when an F-15E Strike Eagle released the GBU-72 over Eglin's test range. It's no wonder the U.S. employed this bomb to send a message to Venezuela. The operation was a warning that the U.S. had the capability, reach, and resolve to bring the fight to narco-terrorist networks, even in the heart of Venezuela. The Trump administration is not relenting, and according to an official, they have deployed 3 U.S. Aegis guided missile destroyers off the coast of Venezuela as part of an effort to address threats. President Donald Trump wants to use the military to go after Latin American drug gangs that have been designated as global terrorist organizations. The ships are the USS Gravely, USS Jason Dunham, and the USS Sampson. In total, about 4,000 sailors and Marines are expected to be committed to the Trump administration's efforts in the Southern Caribbean region. That U.S. official, who was speaking on the condition of anonymity, said the additional commitment of military assets in the broader region would include several P-8 spy planes, warships, and at least 1 attack submarine. The official said the process would be ongoing for several months, and the plan was for them to operate in international airspace and international waters. The naval assets can be used to not just carry out intelligence and surveillance operations, but also as a launching pad for targeted strikes if a decision is made, the official added. Venezuela's Ministry Communications did not immediately respond to a request for comment. However, without referring to the warships, President Nicolas Maduro said in an address that Venezuela will defend its seas, its skies, and its lands. He alluded to what he called the outlandish, bizarre threat of a declining empire. In fact, this isn't the first time the U.S. entangled itself in Venezuelan affairs. Aside from military warfare, there are other ways through which the U.S. is handling cartels. The United States Treasury Department has recently sanctioned the alleged leader of Tren de Aragua, the Venezuelan gang that the administration of President Donald Trump has used as justification for its immigration crackdown. The Treasury's Office of Foreign Assets Control released a statement where it said Giovanni Vicente Mosquera Serrano, the alleged leader, was not only sanctioned but also indicted by the Department of Justice. According to unsealed court documents, Mosquera Serrano faces charges related to drug trafficking and terrorism. He was also added to the FBI's 10 Most Wanted list, and in addition to that, a $3 million reward was offered for information leading to his arrest or conviction. Scott Bessent, the Treasury Secretary, accused Tren de Aragua, under Mosquera Serrano's leadership, of terrorizing U.S. communities and facilitating the flow of illicit narcotics into the country. In truth, this is the latest effort in the Trump administration's campaign to crack down on criminal activity that it claims is tied to the proliferation of foreign gangs and criminal networks in the U.S. Earlier this year, the Trump administration designated Tren de Aragua and other Latin American gangs as foreign terrorist organizations, a category more commonly used to describe international groups with violent political aims. But President Trump has used the threat of criminal networks based abroad to justify the use of emergency powers during his second term. To make it clearer, Donald Trump has claimed that Tren de Aragua is coordinating its U.S. activities with the government of Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro. That allegation was then used to justify the use of a rare wartime law, the Alien Enemies Act of 1798. Trump leveraged the Alien Enemies Act as the legal basis for a large number of alleged gang members under the claim that the presence of groups like Tren de Aragua constituted a foreign invasion on U.S. soil. As a result of that, more than 200 people were sent to a maximum security prison in El Salvador, where many of them remain to this day. But people have spoken up against those deportations. They have drawn widespread criticism, along with a slew of legal challenges. Critics have said that the expedited deportations violated the immigrants' rights to due process. They also pointed out that many of the deported men did not have criminal records. In fact, the legal representatives for some of the men have vehemently argued their clients appear to have been imprisoned based on their tattoos and wardrobe choices. But these claims have been disputed by the Department of Homeland Security. President Trump is determined to uproot cartels from the United States and does not mind if he has to do so from the home country of the alleged cartels. That explains his missile stakes, hammer operations, and drone strikes from Mexico to Yemen, and now Venezuela. What do we really know about this feared Venezuela gang? The Tren de Aragua, the Venezuelan gang that President Trump is targeting in his latest wave of deportations, formed in a rather unconventional way. It did not form in a room where men sat around a conference table to deliberate. The gang actually formed in a prison facility, but has now spread out its tentacles to become a multinational crime organization that has pulled off brazen attacks in places ranging from New York City to Santiago, Chile. That explains why Trump is so hard on them. Tren de Aragua, which is Spanish for the Train of Aragua, was founded in 2014 in the Tocaron prison in the central Venezuelan state of Aragua. It may have taken its name from a union of railroad workers building a train connection between Caracas and Aragua. The gang largely controlled the Tocaron prison, where again, something unconventional was going on. What was supposed to be a prison facility had a zoo, swimming pool, disco, restaurant, and bar. From behind bars, its leaders ordered robberies, kidnappings, and murders. Problems began for the gang when their country sank into its worst economic meltdown in history and crime became less lucrative. The Tren de Aragua had to branch out overseas. It recruited new gang members from among the 8 million Venezuelans who had fled the country's economic crisis. Initially, it established criminal cells in neighboring Colombia, Peru, and Chile, where it smuggled drugs and people and operated extortion rackets and prostitution rings. Tren de Aragua has been on the headline for major crimes, but its most notorious alleged crime was the 2024 killing of Ronald Ojeda, a former Venezuelan army officer who conspired against Nicolas Maduro, the country's authoritarian leader, then fled to Chile. Suspected gang members dressed as Chilean police officers abducted Ojeda from his apartment. Days later, his lifeless body was found stuffed in a suitcase and buried in cement. 2 Tren de Aragua members have been arrested in the case. Then the gang eventually expanded to the United States, which is home to about 700,000 Venezuelan migrants. Besides a wave of robberies, the Tren de Aragua is suspected in the shooting of 2 New York police officers and the killing of a former Venezuelan police officer in Florida. Gang members have been arrested in Pennsylvania, Florida, New York, Texas, and California. Before the Trump administration designated the Tren de Aragua as a foreign terrorist organization, the Biden administration had already labeled it as a transnational criminal organization. The U.S. campaign against Venezuelan cartels, especially the Tren de Aragua, is an escalation in the use of military tools against criminal networks abroad. And by labeling these groups as both terrorist and criminal organizations, the administration has given itself latitude to act through sanctions, deportations, or direct military strikes. Even though critics are arguing against the use of force, one thing is certain: the fight against narco-terrorism has entered a new phase, one where the United States is willing to project force far beyond its borders to dismantle cartels at their source. Wild chase off the coast. A high-speed boat loaded with $13 million in drugs meets a U.S. destroyer on patrol. The cartel crew thought they could slip by, but this warship had other plans. Radar locked on, engines roared, and tension shot through the waves as sailors braced for a showdown. What happens when a merchant of chaos faces a naval giant prepared to strike? Lives hang in the balance as orders fly and decisions become life or death. Will the smugglers find a way out, or is this their final run? Get ready for every twist and turn ahead. May 25th, 2025. Somewhere in the Caribbean, the sea lies calm under a blazing sun. It seems like any quiet morning. Then a Navy P-8 Poseidon overhead notices a lone vessel. No name, no flag, no AIS signal. Just a bare hull drifting through the funnel, a known smuggling route. That sight triggers instant concern, setting off alarms across the command chain as crews scramble to find out who's behind this ghostly ship. A tense race against time begins immediately. The guided missile destroyer USS Gravely is on alert. Sent from Norfolk under U.S. Northern Command's Maritime Homeland Defense Authority, mission is clear: intercept threats before they reach U.S. shores. Top priority, drug shipments. Each haul intercepted cuts cartel funds and curbs violence back home. On deck, Coast Guard Law Enforcement Detachment 401 stands ready. They're the ship's crime-fighting team, skilled in boarding tactics and primed to turn suspicious vessels into evidence. With encrypted comms and satellite eyes, every move is precise, ensuring Gravely stays one step ahead in keeping seas and communities safer. Timing and teamwork matter most out here. Just after 6 a.m., the USS Gravely spots an unidentified vessel on radar. No flag, no call sign, just dead silence. Attempts to communicate go unanswered. That silence raises alarms. Orders snap across the deck. Intercept immediately. Sailors spring into motion as RHIBs hit the waves, engines growling with purpose, slicing toward the mystery in the water. The leadette team loads M4 carbines, boarding gear, and body cams. From the bridge, officers watch every move: speed, waves, distance. One slip could spark a life-or-death standoff. Strangely, the smuggler boat doesn't bolt. It just bobs like an empty shell. Maybe the crew thinks they can bluff their way through. Maybe they misjudge who's closing in. But when a Navy destroyer locks on, bluffing rarely works. From a distance, this could pass for a fishing boat, but patterns matter more than looks. Trained eyes spot odd fuel lines, odd weight distribution, and subtle wake differences. In the funnel, where narco-traffickers funnel runs from South America north, those signs stand out against routine traffic. As the RHIBs draw near, tension builds. The sea stays calm, but every second feels heavy. On Gravely, the crew tracks the approach: wind direction, wave height, and any sign of crew on deck. On the small boat, silence hangs thick. No engine revving to flee, no hurried crew movement. It's almost eerie. The leadette team knows this scenario. A vessel that won't run might hide surprises below deck. Large caches of contraband, perhaps weapons, maybe hidden compartments built to deceive. Communication gear crackles. Hails go unanswered again. Protocols kick in, show of force. Gravely maneuvers to a position that blocks a clear escape route without endangering the airships. The goal is to project strength without escalating too fast. At this stage, nonviolent compliance is best. But everyone stays ready. Boarding in open water is risky. A wrong step on either side can turn routine into tragedy. The leadette leader signals the RHIB helmsman. Slow approach, ready to stop the suspect boat if it drifts into a dangerous angle. Body cams roll. Every action is recorded. Sailors exchange quick glances. Training drills have covered this, but reality can surprise. Underneath calm waves, cartel crews often stash massive loads, multi-million-dollar hauls. The financial stakes can push smugglers to desperate measures. But so far, nothing moves on deck. No frantic scurry, no hidden ladder dropping into the sea. Close enough now, the team shouts clear commands. Identify yourselves, prepare to be boarded. Still no reply. That silence confirms suspicion. The team secures the boarding lines and steps onto the deck with measured caution, eyes scanning every corner. No crew appears. The boat feels abandoned, yet something must be inside. The team splits. One group heads to the cabin, another checks below decks in the engine room. Every hatch, every panel, every hidden nook is fair game. Below deck, signs of recent activity emerge. Loose panels, fresh paint around seams, modified flooring hinting at secret holds. Drug bales might be packed in cramped spaces, with vents rigged to avoid detection. The team works fast. Find entrances to hidden compartments, tally evidence, and secure anything that qualifies as contraband. Meanwhile, breath hovers in helmets. This could be a ghost ship, but cartel crews sometimes hide out of sight until a chance to fight back. Every shadow, every creak in the hull triggers caution. Back on Gravely, lookouts scan the horizon for potential accomplices. The funnel is busy. Fast boats might lurk nearby. Support helicopters stand ready to join if needed. Escort ships monitor radio traffic in case cartel communications buzz about an intercepted vessel. On board the destroyer, officers weigh every detail: weather, sea state, and possible backup needs. The mission isn't over until all evidence is secured and the scene is safe. This interception shows how patterns beat appearances. A vessel that drifts without an ID in a notorious trafficking zone can't be innocent. Calm seas and a fishing boat look can mask high-stakes smuggling. Here, trained eyes and constant vigilance make the difference between a routine patrol and a major drug seizure. And when Gravely and Lead It 401 act together, that difference can shut down a multi-million-dollar operation before it reaches shore. At this point, the team unearths what lies hidden, and the next steps, processing evidence, detaining suspects if found nearby, transferring seized cargo, begin. But for now, in the quiet aftermath of a tense approach, it's clear. In the funnel, no vessel truly drifts by unnoticed. Trained eyes know the difference. And that's where the LEDET team steps in. LEDET stands for Law Enforcement Detachment, a Coast Guard unit embedded on Navy ships to sniff out smuggling. They know every trick: false hulls, hidden holds, even faked engine trouble to buy time. These aren't shoreside officers. They're maritime hunters, trained to turn any vessel into a crime scene if needed. This boat flagged every alarm immediately. No state flag, no response to hails, no paperwork. The hull looked beaten up, but not from real wear. More like someone tried to fake a rugged look. The route it followed didn't match any known fishing pattern. On Gravely's bridge, warning lights flashed. "We've got a runner," someone said, not because the boat was speeding, but because it fit every profile of a smuggling vessel. Then came the surprise. It dropped anchor and waited. Smugglers rarely surrender unless they can't outrun or outsmart you. What they carried must be serious, and the Navy was about to find out how serious. The RHIBs cut through the water fast, two sleek boats moving like knives on glass. Gravely hovered nearby, silent but watchful. Radios crackled as the lead-at lead gave final orders. Steady approach, clear commands, eyes everywhere. Weapons were ready, body cams rolling, every sailor on edge. By the time they reached the suspect vessel, 3 men stood stiff on deck, faces blank but tense. Real fishermen don't freeze when a boarding team shows up. These men seemed to have practiced this moment, yet they looked unprepared. U.S. Coast Guard, prepare to be boarded, no resistance, no sudden moves. The order rang out over loudspeakers. The 3 men exchanged nervous glances, speaking low Spanish among themselves. Silence was their answer. The boarding team climbed aboard with rifles lowered, but not relaxed. Visit, board, search, and seizure, VBSS, kicked in like trained muscle memory. First impressions matter. Motion in hidden spaces, loose items stacked oddly, fresh paint in odd spots. Every detail could hint at hidden compartments. They moved quickly but carefully. The deck felt tight under their boots, as if hiding secrets below. The first thing that caught their eye, the cargo hold sealed with plastic wrap and heavy duct tape. Classic cartel packaging. Under a canvas tarp lay 19 square bundles, each triple wrapped in burlap, tape, then heavy plastic. The scene screamed smuggling. One team member pried open a bundle, off-white bricks stamped with a green-esque cocaine, and lots of it. That discovery confirmed everything. But for the Ledet team, finding the drugs was only the start. Each brick told a story: routes, cartel symbols, stash methods. The green S marked this shipment as part of a network with its own logo code. Behind that marking, far away on land, money and violence waited. For now, though, the team stayed focused on this boat. Secure evidence, document everything on body cams, and make sure no surprises lurked elsewhere on board. While one group stayed to catalog and bag samples, another circled the engine room and below decks, checking for hidden compartments or booby traps. Smugglers sometimes rig compartments to flood if opened wrong or to burn evidence. The team used specialized tools, handheld scanners to detect irregular hull thickness, small cameras to peer into narrow spaces, and careful taps to find hollow spots in floors and bulkheads. Every echo or shadow could hide thousands of dollars worth of contraband. Back on Gravely, lookouts scan the horizon. The funnel is busy. Speedy pangas or support boats might lurk out of sight, waiting to rescue fleeing smugglers or recover dumped cargo. Helicopters stood ready to scramble, and nearby ships monitored radio chatter for any cartel chatter. On the destroyer's bridge, officers tracked weather data, wave height, and possible backup needs. Safety remained top priority. A sudden storm or equipment failure could turn this operation dangerous in seconds. Meanwhile, on the suspect boat, the three men remained on deck under guard. Their faces told of fear and maybe regret, but words were scarce. The boarding team readied questions for when it was safe to talk. Origins of the cargo, planned destination, crew details. But first came evidence gathering, photographs of seals, serial numbers on packing, and GPS logs, if any. Every piece of data would feed into a larger picture of the trafficking network. Finding the cocaine marked a turning point. That load, if delivered, could fund violence and corruption far inland. Here on the open sea, the Ledet team had stopped it cold. Yet handling it was tricky. Too much movement could damage evidence. Too little, and anything missing might raise legal issues later. They bagged samples in tamper-evident containers, labeled each with date, time, location, and witness names. Body cam footage captured every step, ensuring the chain of custody held up in court. With the hold secured, the focus shifted to the vessel itself. Was it owned by the smugglers? Leased? Stolen? Tracing its history could unravel more of the network. Engineers inspected identification plates, engine serial numbers, hull numbers, anything to link the boat to past sightings or theft reports. On Gravely, intelligence officers compared this info with databases, previous seizures, sightings, and known cartel routes. As sunlight shifted across the deck, the Ledet team finished processing the hold. They prepared to move the suspects and evidence onto Gravely or a support vessel. The operation so far showed how patterns beat appearances. A boat with fake wear and odd anchoring behavior stood out against routine traffic. In the funnel, nothing drifts by unnoticed. Trained eyes spotted the signs, and swift action turned a quiet morning into a major drug interception. All that remained was to wrap up this phase, secure the suspects, transfer the cargo, and prepare reports that would help hit the cartel network again and again. Later, back on Gravely, the official weight came in, 860 pounds of pure cocaine. At street value, that's about $13.65 million. The suspects stayed silent. No excuses, no stories. The drugs said everything. The boarding team radioed in the numbers. Evidence was bagged, tagged, photographed, and logged with a strict chain of custody. The three men were cuffed, secured for transport, and the boat was impounded. The Navy was already drafting its report. On Gravely's bridge, the mood stayed calm. Not a celebration. This is serious work, not a party. Instead, there was quiet pride. This wasn't luck. It was intel, planning, and boots-on-deck action. Down below, sailors felt a steady satisfaction. Another big shipment stopped, another crew caught red-handed. Out there somewhere, a cartel boss had to be rethinking plans. U.S. forces were watching too closely. Back on deck, the sun beat down on 19 bales stacked like bricks at a work site. Only this wasn't construction material. Each bale weighed about 45 pounds, wrapped tightly to survive long journeys at sea. No wonder the crew didn't try to flee. Cartels hate wasted shipments, but maybe they figured surrender might earn them better treatment. Either way, when the first bale came aboard, everything shifted. This was more than a bust. It was a message. Each bundle got tagged and logged under LEDET boarding rules. The three men, mid-30s, claiming to be fishing, were photographed, recorded, and processed under maritime law. No weapons showed up on deck, but that detail didn't change much. The contraband alone triggered serious federal charges. Their silent faces spoke volumes. This haul would cost them everything. This mission fits a bigger plan: forward interdiction. The idea is simple. Stop big loads at sea before they ever reach land. Every seized shipment is one fewer dose on the streets, one fewer dollar funding violence, one fewer addict in crisis. Navy and Coast Guard crews train for scenarios like this. They share intel, monitor routes, and position ships and planes along known pathways. By striking early, they cut off the flow, forcing cartels to take bigger risks or shift routes under pressure. With bales this clean, no moisture leaks, seals unbroken, it was clear these weren't amateurs. These operatives moved product for a network that expected precise delivery. Instead, they met a U.S. destroyer and a team of agents ready with clipboards, cameras, and sharp eyes. The moment they saw those bales, any hope of bargaining vanished. This was a hard stop. Once drugs were secured and suspects detained, the real grind began. First, chain of custody. Every bale had to be logged with exact weight, markings, and condition, down to the last gram. Evidence must hold up in court. One slip, mislabeling, a missing photo, can unravel a case. Sailors worked under watchful eyes, following checklists, bag samples in tamper-proof containers, labeled with date, time, location, witness names, attached body cam clips. This paperwork might feel endless, but it's what turns a haul into a conviction. The suspects, zip-tied and photographed, moved to holding quarters aboard Gravely. No immediate interrogation. That's not the Navy's job. Their task is safe detention and transport. Legal teams ashore handle questioning and prosecution. For now, the priority is custody and safety, keeping everyone secure until handover. Next up, handover coordination. The Navy liaises with U.S. authorities, the DEA or a regional Coast Guard cutter with legal authority in that area. Often, suspects and contraband transfer at a U.S. territory port, Puerto Rico, or another jurisdiction where federal courts can take over. Plans include escort routes, transfer timing, and ensuring evidence stays sealed. Meanwhile, engineers and intelligence officers check the vessel itself. Hull numbers, engine serials, and ownership records. Was it stolen? Rented under a fake name? Linking the boat to past sightings or thefts can uncover more of the network. The process is tight, procedural, and bulletproof. Every move gets documented, every step logged. That's how the U.S. Navy and Coast Guard close legal loopholes and make sure traffickers don't slip away on technicalities. Most people only see the bust and the bales splashed in headlines, but what turns an interception into a courtroom win is discipline. Gravely's crew showed plenty of it. The takedown might last minutes, but the aftermath is what really hits the cartels. Behind the scenes, there's a checklist for almost everything. From the moment the boarding team steps onto a suspect boat, body cams record every action. Cargo gets photographed from every angle. Bags go into tamper-evident containers, each labeled with date, time, GPS location, and names of witnesses. Logs note weather conditions and sea state, details that rarely matter on screen, but can matter in court. Even the order in which bales are lifted from the hold ends up in writing. This isn't overkill. It's the difference between a sealed conviction and a case thrown out because one step wasn't properly recorded. This operation wasn't random. It was part of a long-running push called Campaign Martillo, Spanish for hammer, and that name fits. Launched in 2012, Martillo is a team effort led by the US and joined by over a dozen nations. The goal: crush drug routes across the Caribbean and Eastern Pacific before shipments reach shore. The strategy is simple: hit them hard and hit them early. Smugglers often assume that once they clear South American waters, they're in the clear. Campaign Martillo proves otherwise by patrolling known corridors with ships, planes, and drones, showing that no route is safe if you watch closely. Ships like USS Gravely play a key role. An Arleigh Burke-class destroyer may be built for combat, but in these missions it transforms into a floating interdiction unit. Its radar scans hundreds of miles of ocean, picking out small craft amid waves. Data from patrol planes like the P-8 Poseidon feeds in real time, adding infrared views and extra eyes on the water. Yet none of that works without people. The Coast Guard-led teams aboard bring the human edge. They know the tricks smugglers use: false hulls, hidden holds, fake engine trouble. Trained in tight quarter searches, they move fast when the call comes. Detection to boarding can happen in under 30 minutes if conditions allow. On deck, coordination matters. Encrypted communications link the destroyer, patrol plane, nearby ships, and even shore-based command centers. Live satellite feeds share radar tracks and weather updates. Everyone in the chain stays in sync. If the boarding team needs backup, support can scramble helicopters or nearby cutters. At every step, roles are clear. The Navy secures the area. The Coast Guard handles boarding and evidence. Intelligence officers track links to past seizures. Chains of custody start when the instant contraband is spotted and only end when evidence reaches a courtroom-ready storage facility. The bigger picture is this: every ship seized, every ton of drugs removed, chips away at cartel power. When a major haul like Gravely's 860-pound seizure disappears from their supply chain, it forces smugglers to reroute, spend more on security, or risk costlier failures. Over time, these interruptions add up. Campaign Martillo's aim isn't just the one bust, it's the ripple effect, making trafficking riskier and more expensive, shrinking profits and protecting communities from the violence and addiction that follows illegal loads inland. Few see the detailed grind: the hours spent logging evidence in cramped ship offices, the tense checks of hidden compartments, the careful tagging and photographing under sun and salt spray. Yet that work is what stands up when suspects face court. Without airtight records, a big bust can collapse on a technicality. Gravely's crew knows that. Stopping a boat is only half the mission. The other half is making sure the case holds water all the way to prosecution. Each move is supported by secure communications, real-time satellite feeds, and a command chain that acts without delay. Need visual confirmation from 50,000 feet? The MQ-4C Triton delivers live video and radar data straight to analysts. Need infrared scans of a cargo hold? The P-8 Poseidon provides them before boarding starts. Legal authority to board in international waters is part of the mission plan. This operates like a floating command center, linking intel analysts on shore, crews in the air, and federal agencies ready to act when suspects reach port. Cartels depend on speed and confusion. The U.S. Navy counters with systems, training, and zero guesswork. Radar on a destroyer scans hundreds of miles, spotting small vessels among regular traffic. Drones and patrol planes feed constant updates, while encrypted communications keep everyone in sync. When a ghost ship appears without a flag or ID along known smuggling routes, protocols kick in without hesitation. Detection leads to an immediate risk assessment and boarding plan. Stopping 860 pounds of cocaine goes beyond a headline. That load represents money for weapons, bribes, and turf wars across regions. Every bale removed is one less transaction feeding organized crime and instability. Forward interdiction strikes at the heart of the trafficking network. By interrupting one shipment, the timeline for buyers, dealers, transporters, and corrupt officials collapses. The cartel behind this load loses profit and trust. Partners must question routes and methods, making operations riskier and more expensive. Fewer tons reaching U.S. shores means fewer overdoses, fewer street-level conflicts, and fewer families torn apart by addiction. Communities benefit when drugs are stopped offshore. Intelligence gathered during these missions supports onshore law enforcement in targeting distribution networks and financing channels. Arrests at sea feed evidence for prosecutions ashore. Every maritime intercept becomes part of a larger effort to reduce supply and protect public health and safety. Campaign Martillo underpins these actions. Since 2012, more than a dozen nations have shared intel and coordinated patrols across the Caribbean and Eastern Pacific. Once data identifies a suspect vessel, assets converge. Destroyers handle surveillance and security, Coast Guard teams prepare to board, patrol planes and drones provide eyes above, and Allied ships stand by. This networked approach forces traffickers to juggle routes, increasing chances of detection and adding costs. Over time, sustained pressure slows trafficking and reduces violence linked to the trade. On USS Gravely, the process follows strict discipline. From the moment the target is identified, body cams record every move. Boarding teams follow checklists, note weather and sea state, record GPS coordinates, photograph suspicious modifications, and inspect hidden compartments. Each bale is weighed, tagged, photographed, and placed in tamper-evident containers, labeled with date, time, location, and witness names. Logs capture the exact order of removal. That level of detail is essential to avoid legal loopholes and secure convictions. Coordination spans ship, air, and shore. Encrypted comms relay updates, wind and wave conditions, target speed and heading, backup positions, and changes in intel. If conditions deteriorate, plans adjust in real time. Helicopters stand ready to assist if needed. Intelligence officers trace vessel origins by checking hull and engine serials, registration records, and past sightings. Legal teams ashore prepare for the transfer of suspects and evidence to U.S. authorities, often through ports in territories like Puerto Rico. The vessel itself faces secure storage or destruction under legal guidance. Cartel networks feel the impact. Losing a major shipment forces shifts in logistics, testing new routes, and increased security costs. Those changes open fresh opportunities for interdiction. This cumulative pressure raises the risk for traffickers at each step. For each successful interdiction, the balance tilts toward law enforcement. That is the core aim, not a single bust, but sustained disruption of supply chains. For the crew in Let It 401, this is measured in professional pride rather than celebration. Every step follows training and procedures honed over the years. Stopping a vessel in minutes is only half the mission. Documenting evidence and ensuring a solid chain of custody completes it. When suspects face court, airtight records keep cases intact. That discipline hits cartels where it hurts, undermining operations with reliable convictions. One ship, 19 bales, $13.7 million stopped cold at sea. The USS Gravely and its Coast Guard team didn't just board a boat, they shut down a cartel payday. That precision work rarely makes headlines, but always makes a difference. The sea remains under watch, and traffickers learn that no route is safe when systems, training, and discipline come together. In the early months of 2025, the world's most dangerous drug cartels learned that nowhere was truly safe. Deep in the Pacific, a U.S. Navy warship tracked a floating drug lab worth millions, its location betrayed by a web of intelligence and high-tech surveillance. What followed was swift, precise, and devastating, leaving nothing but smoke and scattered debris on the waves. This is the story of how a cartel drug lab was wiped off the map by the U.S. Navy strike. In early 2025, one ship instilled fear in drug lords. For 112 days, the USCGC James, a Legend-class cutter and the fifth of its kind, prowled the Eastern Pacific like a steel shadow. It wasn't a single dramatic chase on TV. It was a steady, grinding push. Planes up early, drones buzzing the horizon, speedboats slicing the waves, and crews watching screens in the dark until the job was done. The James is built for this. On its deck sits a 57mm gun and a phalanx close-in weapon system. There are multiple 50 caliber and 7.62mm machine guns ready to fire, and room below decks for future upgrades. Mine warfare gear, non-line of sight missiles, and even the option to swap the phalanx for a CRAM system. It's a cutter designed not just to sail, but to change the rules of the fight. The mission read like a relay of precision. Surveillance planes and thermal imagers would spot suspicious wakes miles offshore. Drones would move in to get eyes on suspect boats. The cutter and its smaller craft would close fast. In these operations, the crews used every tool they had: drones, aircraft, ships, thermal cameras, and speedy intercept boats. And sometimes the results came all at once. Across runs off the coasts of Peru, Ecuador, and near the Galapagos Islands, crews reported a string of victories. On January 5th, a long-endurance maritime drone climbed a patrol height and locked onto a lone smuggler off Ecuador. These Coast Guard drones can fly for 18 hours and carry cameras sharp enough to read a boat's name from miles away. The drone watched the suspect while the crew planned a quiet intercept. When boarding teams moved in, they found 3 men and 2,250 pounds of cocaine hidden aboard. That small strike set the tone. Tiny signs, huge payoff. The next day, January 6th, the operation escalated. Patrol aircraft spotted 3 go-fast boats racing in formation. Risky for the smugglers, bold for the cutters. Helicopter crews and the James's team synchronized like a clock. The helicopters cut off escape routes while small boats closed in. In the end, all 3 boats were stopped. 9 suspects were arrested, and the haul totaled 13,960 pounds of cocaine. It was one of those rare, clean wins where technology, timing, and courage matched up. On January 7th, the smugglers tried a different trick: a low-profile boat built to slip past radar. But Hytron, the helicopter interdiction crew, was ready. Instead of shooting to kill, they used precision shots to put the engines out of commission, leaving the vessel dead in the water. The crew was detained unharmed, and another 8,240 pounds of cocaine was taken off the map. Smugglers refused to quit. On January 18th, when they tried to dump contraband to lighten their load, the James didn't relent. Its high-speed pursuit boats chased down the suspects while tech teams scooped floating bales from the sea. Recovering nearly 6,000 pounds of cocaine from choppy water is ugly, cold work. Crews risked hypothermia, reefed through oil and salt, and hauled soggy bales aboard. But those bales meant millions lost to the cartels and lives potentially spared on the streets. Taken together, these days show a clear pattern: surveillance that never blinks, helicopters that hit their mark, and boarding teams who do the dangerous work up close. Official tallies in the mission mention drugs seized in 13 interdictions in the Eastern Pacific, while a later offload on March 20th totaled nearly 46,000 pounds taken in 14 interdictions. The numbers jump around because the action was constant, and reports were updated as cases closed. What's clear is the size of the haul: almost 45,000 pounds of pure uncut cocaine, plus roughly 3,800 pounds of marijuana, drugs valued at more than $517.5 million. Across the missions, 34 suspected smugglers were taken into custody. In one sweep, more than a dozen suspects were detained after 6 separate interdictions. For families, towns, and communities back home, the Coast Guard framed the math in stark human terms. This seizure could mean hundreds of lives spared from the grip of addiction, and thousands fewer people exposed to pure cocaine on U.S. streets. Top law enforcement voices put the mission in even sharper terms. U.S. Attorney General Pam Bondi said what the crews did saved countless American lives, and warned that the cocaine intercepted on those seas would otherwise have been distributed across the country, maybe even the world. Officials tied many of the shipments back to powerful cartels, naming the Jalisco New Generation and Sinaloa groups as heavily tied to these runs. Briefly, the cartel's playbook looks familiar: fast boats, hidden compartments, rendezvous points far from shore, and a brutal next man up culture that has kept the flow moving for years. That next man up idea is exactly what the strike aimed to break. Officials in the mission rhetoric promised a hard line. The traffickers were being treated less like organized crime and more like foreign terrorists, in a way that would strip them of their freedom to roam. Voices in the administration vowed to lock these networks down, to remove the safety nets that let a new boss step in and pick up where another left off. The public math officials used was blunt and meant to land. When authorities said over $500 million in illegal drugs were interdicted at sea, they didn't only mean dollars. They argued that the figure equated to lives not lost to overdose, users not introduced to cocaine, and real savings in health and incarceration costs. One calculation cited from the mission estimated 154 lives saved directly from cocaine-related overdose deaths, nearly 11,000 fewer new cocaine users, and around $16.5 million avoided in inmate care and health expenses. Those are big claims, and they are the kind that make a mission feel like more than a headline. They make it feel like an intervention with long, measurable effects. On deck, the work was simpler and grittier. Sailors studied radar blips and night vision screens. Pilots timed intercepts, and small boat crews executed the dangerous leap from cutter to target. For cartel crews on those suspect boats, the James and its partners became a nightmare. Drones and aircraft moved silently. Teams closed in. Evidence and drugs were seized. Men were handcuffed. Boats were scuttled or turned over. The sea, for a time, did not belong to the smugglers. A string of interdictions, a mountain of contraband, and dozens of arrests didn't finish the job. Cartels adapt. But the cutter James did not work alone. Backing the cutter every step of the way was the USCG Mohawk, a 270-foot medium-endurance cutter that brought a different kind of muscle to the hunt. While the James carried long-reach, high-tech sensors and aerial assets, the Mohawk filled gaps with steady seamanship, hands-on law enforcement, and a crew trained to do many jobs at once. Home-ported in Key West, the Mohawk is built for long patrols and quick pivots. One day it might hunt a smuggler, the next it could pull a survivor from choppy water or run a joint exercise with Allied ships. That multi-mission mindset mattered. Interdiction in the Eastern Pacific often requires more than speed or eyes in the sky. Mohawk boarding teams softened targets up close, searching hidden holds, processing evidence, and taking suspects into custody. Their steady presence let the James keep planes and drones focused on new threats farther out. The Mohawk also brought international reach. Its crews worked with partner navies and coast guards to share intelligence and coordinate patrols, closing gaps that traffickers once exploited. Those partnerships turned isolated strikes into a sustained squeeze, making routes riskier and plans harder to hide. At sea, the two cutters made a simple, effective pair. Different tools, same goal. The James could spot a runner miles away and push the chase. The Mohawk could climb aboard, secure the scene, and handle the paperwork and people that follow. Planes overhead, cutters on scene, and boarding teams clearing boats. The layers of effort built a net that was hard to escape. For smugglers used to slipping past one patrol at a time, the combination was brutal. Patient, persistent, and precise. Their teamwork sent a clear message. The sea was no longer a safe route. It bought time for law enforcement ashore to follow leads effectively. The strikes hit the Sinaloa and Jalisco new generation cartels hard, but the sea work was only one part of the fight. What pulled all the pieces together sat quietly in Key West, GMIATF South. Think of it as a brains and tools hub where the U.S. and partner nations turn loose pieces of information into real-world arrests. GIATF isn't dramatic in the movie sense. It looks ordinary from the street. Inside, though, it hums like a machine. Analysts watch screens filled with maps. They read satellite photos, radar tracks, and ship transponders. They pore over phone data and tip lines. Bits of data from customs, foreign navies, and undercover agents arrive in the same room. That is its power. Everything sits next to everything else, so patterns jump out fast. When a pattern appears, GIATF does two things at once. First, it predicts. Using years of case files and computer models, analysts make heat maps that show where smugglers will likely try to move next. Those maps are gold. They let the Coast Guard and Navy position cutters, planes, and helicopters in the best spots, sometimes days before a run even begins. Second, GIATF acts. It can task ships and aircraft directly. That speed matters. Drug boats can disappear in minutes once they see they've been found. One of GIATF's smartest moves is putting lead-at teams on Navy ships. These are small groups of Coast Guard law enforcement experts who can board a boat and make arrests. The Navy brings big sensors and long legs at sea. The Coast Guard brings the legal authority to take criminals off ships. Together, they work like a tag team. Navy finds, Coast Guard finishes. The intelligence from these sea fights does more than stop loads. It fingerprints the networks. Every arrest, every radio intercept, every seized phone can point to bosses inland. Analysts trace payment routes, identify safe houses, and map who meets whom. With that work, prosecutors can build cases that reach past low-level smugglers to the people who organize the runs. International partners are vital too. JIATF shares leads with law enforcement in South America, Europe, and beyond. Those partners help close ports, arrest brokers, and follow the money. Trafficking is global. Fighting it must be global as well. This whole system, drones spotting wakes, destroyers scanning with long-range radar, cutters closing fast, leadette teams boarding, and analysts knitting data together in Key West, creates pressure the cartels didn't expect. Routes that worked for years become risky. Trusted runners get caught. Payment chains fray. That is the point. Break the flow so the cartels can't simply replace one busted crew with the next man up. Does that end the traffickers? Number cartels adapt. But JIATF's approach turns short-term wins into long-term headaches for them. Every seized shipment and every arrested mid-level operator adds to the evidence piles that can reach deeper into cartel hierarchies. Heat maps guide the next patrol. Intelligence points to the next arrest. And the cycle goes on. The drug war at sea is messier and stranger than most people think. It is not just fast boats and hidden holds. It now includes real working submarines. Crude, clever, and terrifyingly effective. These vessels can slip under the waves and carry loads worth hundreds of millions of dollars. That makes them worth the huge risks the traffickers take. This did not come from nowhere. Back in the 1980s, smugglers towed simple tubes behind boats. It was clever but crude. By the 1990s, those tubes evolved into self-powered subs built in jungle workshops. Picture men in muddy clearings, cutting fiberglass and welding by hand under a tree canopy, hiding the work from satellites and planes. The boats weren't pretty, they were built to disappear. Today's narco subs are a strange mix of low-tech and smart design. Many are roughly 80 feet long and can go long distances on a single run. Some can travel underwater for long stretches without refueling. They carry up to 10 tons of drugs with small crews of 5 people squeezed into hot, dark spaces for days at a time. The price to build one, $1 to $2 million, is small compared to a single cargo's value of over $100 million. That math explains why traffickers keep making them. Smugglers have learned to make these subs hard to spot. They paint them in ocean colors. They shape them to cut the water with little wake. They add materials that lower heat signatures so aircraft with thermal cameras struggle to see them. Builders have even used lead or other tricks to hide heat, making planes and drones less able to pick them out. Those tricks make the subs hard to find, but they also bring new dangers. Many narco subs have scuttle systems, valves that flood the boat fast if capture seems likely. In minutes, the crew can sink the vessel and its cargo to the seafloor. When that happens in deep water, the drugs are often lost forever. Recovering a sunken sub from 1,000 or more feet down is next to impossible without special gear and huge budgets. Finding and stopping these subs means changing the game. Radar is not enough. Forces use sonar, magnetic detectors, long-range patrol aircraft, and tip-offs from human intelligence. Ships listen for odd sounds. Planes look for faint wakes or changes in sea color. Analysts stitch together signals from satellites, radios, and informants. It is a hunt that mixes science, patience, and luck. There is also a human cost. The crews who ride these subs live in hellish conditions: heat, damp, no fresh air, and a constant fear of drowning. Traffickers also force or trick locals into the work, turning desperate men into expendable riders on a death machine. Operation Orion in 2024 made it very clear. The narco submarine threat was no longer local. When one of these subs was stopped on a run toward Australia, after a journey of more than 10,000 miles across the Pacific, the world could see the scale of the problem. This was not a one-off trick. It was proof that cartels had learned to build boats that could travel long distances and dodge normal checks. That changed the map. The fight at sea is a constant give and take. For every new trick the traffickers invent, law enforcement develops a counter. Thermal cameras hunt for faint heat. Long-range drones scan the horizon for odd wakes. Artificial intelligence sifts through oceans of data to spot patterns people might miss. Still, experts estimate that for every narco submarine found, 3 or 4 slip past. That math shows the job is far from finished. That gap is exactly why Operation Martillo mattered. Launched in January 2012, its name, Hammer, fits the goal. It pulled nations together to hit cartels where they were strongest. Shipping routes. Ships, planes, and special teams patrolled the sea lanes from South America northward. The operation started small, but its tactics were smart. Teams cut larger patrols into tight patrol zones. Intelligence was shared in real time, and law enforcement inside the region could act faster because they were watching together. Martillo's early results were hard to ignore. Hundreds arrested, dozens of boats taken, and tons of cocaine off the water. Those numbers proved a basic truth. Cooperation works. If ships from different countries patrol the same seas and share what they see, smugglers lose the safe windows they once relied on. Operation Orion took that same idea and turned it up. By late 2024, 62 countries were on the same page. Small coast guards and big navies alike pushed assets into play. For 6 intense weeks, planes and ships searched, tracked, and boarded. The result was a record haul: 225 tons of cocaine in a single sweep, and more than 1,000 tons of marijuana and other drugs. A total street value the teams put at roughly $8.5 billion. Those numbers stunned many. They also rewired how the world looked at maritime drug trafficking. So what made Orion different? First, scale. More nations meant more eyes and more places to close down. Second, speed. Intelligence moved faster between partners, so forces could act before a suspect vanished. Third, tools. Satellites, patrol aircraft, sonar, long-endurance drones, and AI all combined to find things that would have been invisible a few years earlier. But big operations also reveal limits. Narco subs that sink themselves, remote jungle shipyards, deep water drops of cargo, those are hard to undo with a single mission. Cartel networks still have reach. Money moves fast, and corrupt points of contact can erode gains. And the human side is grim. Many crews on those subs are desperate people, sometimes forced or tricked into riding a death box across an ocean. Coastal communities that once saw smuggling as a living face growing danger when the cartels respond to pressure with violence and bribery. So what's next? The answer is not a single trick, but a long path. More tech, yes, but also better laws, faster courts, stronger anti-corruption work, and sustained international will. Recovering sunken submarines, following the money back to bank accounts and safe houses, and prosecuting the boss networks ashore all take time and money. Multinational operations like Martillo and Orion show that it can be done, and done at scale. They also show how the fight must keep evolving. They made Orion work by putting together pieces no single country could hold alone. The Americans brought satellite radar that could spot tiny wakes from space. The Dutch sent underwater drones to peer into hulls and scan below the waves. Colombian units, who know the jungle and river networks, found hidden launch sites in the places where subs and boats were built. Even landlocked nations helped, tracking money, phone calls, and shipping papers. Each partner gave one thing the others needed. Put together, those things became a force few smugglers could match. What set Orion apart was how fast and how clean the sharing was. Command centers worked around the clock, with officers from many nations side by side. Live feeds, maps, and chatter moved between them in real time. If a smuggler tried to change course after a tip, they often sailed right into someone else's patrol box. It was like closing doors on a hallway, where one gap opened, another shut. The seizures did more than stop dozens of shipments. Every arrest and every seized phone or laptop told a story. Analysts rebuilt route maps, linked names, and found inland contacts. The street price of cocaine climbed because the supply got thinner. That price rise hit the cartel's bottom lines, and money, more than sailors, matters most to these groups. To keep moving drugs, traffickers lean on two main tools: go-fasts and narco subs. The go-fasts are the simple, brutal answer to speed and stealth. Picture a 30-foot boat with 3 or 4 outboard engines, each like a sports car motor. Those engines push the boat past 80 miles per hour. Painted dark to hide in the sea, stripped down to hold fuel and drugs, a go-fast carries one driver and as much cargo as it can. Extra tanks mean it can run 500 miles or more without stopping. The design is old, the same idea used by rum runners in the Prohibition era, but updated with modern motors and GPS. Catching a go-fast on the open water is almost impossible if you only have surface ships. That's where Hit Run comes in. These Coast Guard helicopter teams fly MH-65 Dolphins armed with rifles and trained marksmen. Instead of chasing, they fly over and tell the boat to stop. If it keeps running, Hetron snipers aim for the engines, not people, and put the boat out of action. The engines die, the chase ends. Boarding teams then move in to secure the crew and the drugs, but the traffickers keep changing. When speedboats become too risky, they turn to subs and semi-submersibles. When radar gets better, they paint hulls to blend with the sea or add materials to hide heat. When satellites watch the surface, they try to stage moves at night or use motherships that carry smaller runners far out to sea before dropping them off. So the answer is never just one tool. Orion showed that you need many tools used together: planes, ships, helicopters, underwater drones, satellites, money tracking, and fast legal moves. It also showed that a shared plan is stronger than solo effort. The cartels can still find gaps, but filling one hole often opens another. That's why the best defense is constant pressure, keep the patrols active, keep the intelligence flowing, and keep the legal and financial levers engaged. The cartels thought they could outsmart the world's navies by blending in and slipping under the radar. Literally. Go fast disguised as fishing boats, fake nets piled on deck, even bogus crew uniforms. Some had hidden compartments below the waterline, perfect for stashing bales of cocaine, where a quick inspection would reveal nothing but empty space. Then came the low-profile vessels, part speedboat, part submarine. They barely break the water's surface, with just enough above for air intakes and a small cockpit. Painted the same blue as the open ocean, they're nearly invisible to the naked eye and hard for radar to pick up. Slower than a go-fast but harder to find, they became the new favorite for smugglers. But what the cartels didn't count on was running into the USCGC James, one of the most advanced cutters the U.S. Coast Guard has ever deployed. The James is not just a ship, it's a floating command center, a tracker, and a hunter all in one. First, size matters. At 418 feet long, the James has the endurance to stay at sea for up to 60 days without refueling. That means it can patrol far out in the Pacific or Atlantic, waiting patiently while smugglers think they've escaped. Smaller patrol boats have to return to port much sooner, leaving gaps the traffickers could exploit. Second, the James carries an entire surveillance arsenal. It has high-powered radar that can track small wakes miles away, thermal cameras that pick up heat signatures from engines, even those hidden below decks, and drones that can be launched directly from the ship. These drones can fly ahead, scan suspicious boats, and send a live video back to the crew. Third, the James doesn't hunt alone. It carries its own MH-65 Dolphin helicopter and boarding teams ready to move at a moment's notice. If radar spots a suspicious blip, the helicopter can be airborne in minutes. The speed and range of the Dolphin mean it can catch a go-fast before it ever gets close to its destination. Then there's the boarding crew. These aren't just sailors, they're trained for high-risk interdictions. Fast, armed, and coordinated, they can intercept a target by small boat, helicopter drop, or both at once. And because the James is part of a vast international network like Operation Orion, it can call in help from allied ships or planes in nearby waters. The James also has another edge: data fusion. It takes satellite information, intelligence from other countries, and real-time sensor readings, and blends them into a single, constantly updated picture of the surrounding seas. That means when a smuggler switches routes, the James already knows and is waiting. Deep in cartel territory, hidden beneath thick jungle canopies, sits a drug lab the world isn't supposed to find. But if the US ever sent in its most advanced stealth bomber, the story would be very different. With radar-defying curves, deadly precision, and a strike speed that leaves no time to react, the target wouldn't stand a chance. Here's how and why a US B-2 bomber plans to destroy cartel drug labs in seconds. For decades, drug cartels have stayed one step ahead of US defenses, but in recent years, their methods have become more advanced and more dangerous than ever before. The human cost has been staggering. In the 1980s, overdoses claimed around 2,500 American lives each year. By the early 2000s, the toll had surged to 20,000. Now that number has exploded to over 110,000 lives lost annually. To put that into perspective, drugs have now killed more Americans than both World War I and World War II combined. The impact is felt most sharply in poor communities, where resources to combat the crisis are scarce. And yet the appetite for illegal drugs shows no sign of slowing. The United States accounts for just 4.4% of the world's population, but consumes over 80% of the world's opioids, a figure that fuels a multi-billion-dollar criminal industry. In response, the U.S. has fortified its borders and expanded its patrol networks. But the cartels have learned to sidestep these defenses by going where few expected, beneath the waves. Submarines, once thought far too complex for smugglers, have become their hidden advantage. The first so-called narco subs emerged in the 1990s, crude creations built from wood and fiberglass deep in remote, swampy regions. These makeshift vessels avoided satellite and drone detection simply because of where they were built, out of sight and far from prying eyes. But since 2006, law enforcement agencies have been tracking and capturing a new kind of smuggling craft, the low-profile vessel, or LPV. At first glance, these boats didn't look much different from today's go-fast boats, except they sat much lower in the water, making them harder to spot. Built from advanced materials like fiberglass, the early LPVs were basically sealed speedboats designed to glide just above the waves without drawing attention. Inside, the setup was simple. A small stateroom sat at the back for the crew, and in the middle, a large cargo hold carried the real prize, tons of illegal drugs bound for international markets. But over the years, these designs have been fine-tuned into something far more sophisticated. Modern LPVs no longer look like basic speedboats. They have specialized hull shapes, often with a sharply pointed bow and tapered tail to slice cleanly through the water. The cabin is small and streamlined, with sloping sidewalls that help reduce the vessel's radar signature. And when it comes to hiding from detection, fiberglass is still a favorite. This lightweight yet sturdy material makes the craft almost invisible to sonar and radar, giving it a major advantage in evading patrols. The stealth doesn't end there. LPVs move just below the surface, painted in shades of blue that blend perfectly with the surrounding sea. From above, they're almost impossible to see with the naked eye. Newer versions have taken stealth a step further, routing the engine exhaust along the bottom of the hull so it cools before being released. This means they give off far less heat, making them extremely difficult to detect with infrared cameras. Even so, the designs continue to evolve. Some of the latest models are built from metal instead of fiberglass, a change that's caught the attention of authorities. These upgraded LPVs ride so low that even in calm seas, their noses dip below the waterline. Many are equipped with hydroplanes at the back, allowing the crew to adjust their running depth while underway. Why the cartels are making these changes isn't entirely clear, but it's obvious that every tweak is aimed at making detection even harder. While LPVs dominate surface-level smuggling, the cartel's underwater operations have also expanded. Most narco submarines are still built deep in the jungles along Colombia's Pacific coast. The process mirrors how cocaine is produced, hidden away in makeshift facilities, far from main roads and nearly impossible to detect from the air. Many of these shipyards are tucked along Colombia's inner rivers, where the dense vegetation and remote locations provide natural cover. Authorities in Colombia have stepped up their efforts, no longer just targeting subs in transit, but striking directly at these hidden shipyards. The challenge, however, is finding them in the first place. These facilities are often camouflaged so well that they blend seamlessly into their surroundings, with workshops hidden under thick tree canopies or even disguised as fishing huts. The cartels haven't confined themselves to Colombia either. Similar illegal shipyards have sprung up in Ecuador, Brazil, and Guyana, showing how widespread the trade has become. And behind much of this activity lies a powerful and long-standing player: the Revolutionary Armed Forces of Colombia, better known as FARC. With construction sites scattered across multiple countries, expert builders on the payroll, and powerful allies like FARC, the cartels have turned LPVs and narco subs into highly effective smuggling tools. The result is modern drug subs stretching around 80 feet in length and capable of traveling up to 2,500 miles without refueling. That's enough range to cross entire oceans undetected. Each one costs between $1 million and $2 million to construct, but the investment is worth it to the cartels. A single run can haul up to 10 tons of drugs, worth over $150 million on the street. These vessels are engineered for stealth. Painted in muted shades of gray and blue, they melt into the ocean's surface. Their streamlined design minimizes wake, making them nearly invisible at a distance. Some are even lined with lead, shielding them from thermal imaging cameras that search for heat signatures from above. If detection is unavoidable, the crew has one final, ruthless trick. Open a special valve and sink the vessel within minutes. Both the sub and its cargo vanish into the deep, out of reach of any recovery effort. But submarines are only one part of the cartel's maritime strategy. When speed is essential, they deploy go-fast boats, sleek, high-powered vessels about 30 feet long, often fitted with 3 or 4 engines as powerful as those in racing cars. Capable of hitting over 80 miles per hour, they race across the open sea before most patrol boats can even react. Go-fast ride low in the water and are usually painted ocean blue, making them difficult to spot from above. They typically carry just one operator, leaving space for massive fuel tanks that can hold up to 2,000 gallons. This allows them to travel more than 500 miles without stopping, enough to make direct runs from Colombia to Jamaica or from the Bahamas into Florida. In recent years, the cartels have taken things a step further with hybrid vessels that combine speed and stealth. These low-profile boats ride so close to the water that only a small section of the craft is visible above the surface. Built with radar-resistant materials and painted to match the sea, they are designed to evade both the human eye and electronic detection. While they top out at about 30 miles per hour, slower than go-fast, they are far harder to track. By combining deep-diving subs, high-speed go-fasts, and nearly invisible low-profile boats, smugglers have created a layered approach that is incredibly difficult to stop. Their operations can begin deep in South America and end anywhere along the U.S. coastline, with almost no warning of where the next shipment will surface. The result? An ever-expanding, multi-billion-dollar network that's flooding the U.S. with drugs, fueling an addiction crisis that claims more lives each year than many major wars combined. With technology and tactics improving constantly, the battle against these maritime smuggling routes has become one of the most complex challenges in the history of the drug war. The U.S. government is preparing to unleash one of its most feared weapons, the B-2 Spirit bomber. This jet isn't like anything the cartels have ever faced. On March 29th, several B-2s flew silently toward the Middle East in the dead of night. At precisely 2 that morning, the first bombs dropped on Sada. 10 key targets vanished in minutes: command centers, radar stations, and bunkers used for secure communications. Built initially to stop nuclear war, the B-2 remains one of the planet's most advanced stealth bombers. It can fly into enemy territory without being spotted, drop deadly payloads, and disappear before anyone reacts. Each of its 4 engines produces 17,300 pounds of thrust, giving the jet the power to cruise at over 600 miles per hour while staying high above most missile systems, including anything the cartels might try to use. Stealth is at the heart of the B-2. There's a measure called radar cross-section, or RCS. It tells how big a plane looks to radar. A large RCS makes an aircraft easy to spot. A small one can make it almost invisible. The B-2's RCS is tiny, just 0.1 square meter. That's smaller than a bird on radar. By contrast, an F-15 fighter jet shows up much larger, nearly 250 times the B-2's radar profile. All those details add up in a mission. A tiny radar signature means the bomber can cross defenses before they even know it's there. High speed and altitude keep it out of reach for many missile systems. Powerful engines mean it can get to distant targets fast. In the March 29th operation, those traits let the B-2 hit 10 vital sites in a single night. Command nodes stopped working, radar nets went dark, and secure bunkers were destroyed in minutes. The plane's design and raw power change how a strike unfolds. Radar returns are tiny, reaction time is short, and the bomber can be gone before a coordinated response forms. Flying high and fast while hiding from sensors gives the B-2 a rare mix of reach and surprise. Its shape, engines, and low RCS work together to make detection slow and response times too slow. On paper, those numbers are simple. 4 engines at 17,300 pounds thrust, cruise over 600 miles per hour, and an RCS of 0.1 square meter. On March 29th, 10 key targets vanished in minutes in a single operation. Stealth isn't magic, it's smart design. The B-2 hides by using a shape and surface that work together to trick radar. Its body has smooth curves and flowing lines that bounce radar waves away instead of back to the sender. At steep angles, usually between 60 and 90 degrees, radar energy just slides off. To enemy systems, the plane can look like nothing at all, as if it simply isn't there, even when it's coming straight at them. That shape is only half the story. The B-2's skin is coated in more than ordinary paint. From a distance, it looks black, good for night missions, but that surface is a mix of classified composite materials and a special iron ball paint. Together, they soak up nearly 80% of incoming radar waves. So if a radar operator ever did catch a hint of something, it would likely register as a bird or a puff of cloud, not a $2 billion flying beast loaded with bombs. Some radars still in use make no difference. Old systems like the Soviet P-18 spoon rest and newer ones like the Kadir work in the L-band, about 1 to 2 gigahertz. Those radars are fine for big targets, but against an aircraft like the B-2, they are almost useless. Trying to find a stealth bomber with those radars is like catching a needle with a fishing net. It just slips through. No matter how powerful the radar or how skilled the operator, the B-2 can remain hidden. All these design choices add up: a shape that deflects waves, a coating that absorbs most signals, and a very small radar return make the plane hard to see on screens. That makes surprise possible. Whether flying over deserts, through jungles, or above deep coastal waters, the bomber can approach unseen, strike key systems, and vanish before a response can form. In practice, mission planners use this edge in phases. The first wave destroys command centers, radars, and bunkers used for secure messages. After that initial strike, B-2s pull back. Then a follow-up team moves in to hit remaining targets while defenses are still piecing together what happened. The bomber's near invisibility is what makes that cycle effective. A quiet way to remove the parts that keep an enemy network running. This method depends entirely on stealth, timing, and precise planning skills. When the fight moves from the shoreline into the depths of the jungle or under the ground, the tools change. In the case the extract describes, it wasn't just one plane doing all the work. It was a whole system built to find, break, and finish key parts of an enemy network. First came the FA-18 Super Hornets from the USS Truman. They roared in and hit communications towers and cartel broadcast stations. The very things cartels use to send orders across remote camps. Take away those towers and the network stumbles. Suddenly, remote cells can't hear orders. They can't pass warnings. They're blind and deaf. After that first wave, the B-2s moved in. They weren't there to flatten the forest. They used smaller, precise weapons, 500-pound GBU-38 bombs. These have a blast radius near 80 meters, enough to destroy a tower or bunker, but small enough to avoid smashing the whole spread of trees around it. That kind of precision matters in places where you want to stop the enemy without turning a jungle into rubble. Precision separates planned strikes from chaos. By the time the bombs hit, cartel fighters often hadn't even heard the planes. Their air defenses, if any, were likely gone before alarms went off. The extract points out how the bomber's engines and exhaust design helped that happen. The engines are tucked into the airframe with special exhaust ducts that diffuse heat before it escapes. That design cuts the aircraft's infrared signature by about 80%. In simple terms, heat-seeking missiles have a much harder time finding a target that doesn't look hot. The B-2 can move like a ghost through systems that track heat, but the stealth plane doesn't fly alone. It works with Navy E-2D Hawkeye radar planes that act like watchtowers in the sky. The Hawkeyes share real-time data through secure links, giving the bomber a full 3D picture of the airspace. And they do it without the B-2 turning on any radar that would betray its position. That data sharing is a force multiplier. The bomber can avoid threats, pick the best attack path, and time strikes when they will do the most damage. When the target is hidden underground, a bunker, a hardened data center, or a buried lab, the B-2 uses heavy hitters. The extract describes specially modified GBU-31J DAM bombs with penetrator warheads. Dropped from 50,000 feet, these bombs can fall for over 40 seconds before punching deep underground and exploding inside. The ground shakes. The hideout is destroyed. By the time anyone reacts, the bomber is already miles away. Connectivity makes the B-2 even more dangerous. It's linked into the U.S. Combat Command Network and can get target updates while airborne via satellites. It sends and receives mission data through secure radio channels and taps into the Link 16 tactical data network. That constant feed keeps pilots current on changes, threats, and new targets, even when deep inside hostile territory. On top of that, the B-2 carries an internal system that scans electromagnetic signals. If an enemy radar tries to lock on, the system alerts the crew and suggests evasive moves. Change altitude, shift course, or drop out of a patrol path. That quick warning is the difference between a clean exit and getting pinned down. And the bomber still brings a massive punch. Inside its bomb bays, it can carry up to 40,000 pounds of weapons. That can look like 16 2,000-pound JDAMs, 8 500-pound Mk-82s, or a single gigantic 30,000-pound GBU-57 penetrator designed to smash the toughest underground bunkers. The extract even notes the B-2 can carry nuclear weapons, like the B-61 or B-83. Not used here, but mentioned as the closest thing to a true nuclear option. In the political frame described, this represents the heaviest tool the administration has, short of crossing the ultimate red line. The result is a layered approach. Fast planes take down the eyes and ears. Stealth bombers remove command nodes and harden sites, and precision weapons do the damage while limiting wider destruction. That greatly raises the cost and risk for anyone running hidden labs, shipyards, or command centers. Politics and secrecy hover over it all. Insiders say the U.S. might act without final permission from Mexico, potentially running a secret operation with more drones, bombers, fighters, and personnel than the region has seen in years. When NBC asked, the National Security Council refused to comment. Mexico's president, named in the extract as Claudia Sheinbaum, has warned the U.S. it will not allow unauthorized action on its soil. Still, the extract reports that Trump's pick for ambassador, Ronald Johnson, supports a solo mission if needed, and Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth warned Mexican officials that a strike could happen with or without their green light. But behind the silence and diplomatic standoffs, a political shift was already setting the stage for an aggressive play, one that would change the entire fight against the cartels. In 2024, while running for a second term, Donald Trump promised he would crush the cartels. And once he won, he moved fast. In a speech to Congress on March 4th, he called the cartels a clear danger to American lives. He said the cartels were waging war on the United States and that it was time for America to fight back. That speech didn't come out of nowhere. 2 weeks earlier, Trump had already labeled 8 cartels as foreign terrorist groups. That label changed the rules. It gave U.S. forces, including the Navy, more power to treat cartel operations like counterterrorism targets. The result was a quick tightening of ties between governments and militaries. Mexico's Senate agreed to a new joint training plan that put the U.S. Army's 7th Special Forces Group together with Mexico's elite naval marines. It was a big step, a public sign that both countries were getting ready for a much tougher fight. At the same time, the CIA began sending more high-tech drones over Mexico. Those drones watched cartel moves from the sky and gathered secret information on how these groups work. Behind the scenes, military and intelligence leaders started talking about options that would have sounded extreme not long ago. 6 current and former officials from the U.S. military, law enforcement, and intelligence circles said drone strikes were now on the table. People were discussing hitting cartel leaders, vehicles, drug labs, storage yards, anything that was part of the trafficking network. Those talks were reportedly happening at the highest levels: the White House, the Defense Department, and top intelligence chiefs. And sources say the Mexican government knew these conversations were taking place. This push wasn't totally new. In 2020, while Trump was still president, former Defense Secretary Mark Esper said Trump asked if the U.S. military could launch missiles at drug labs in Mexico and then deny it afterward. Trump and his team denied that claim, but the comment stuck in people's minds. Many believe that the idea to use force and then shrug it off never really left the president's thinking. For Trump and his supporters, the math is simple. Put enough pressure on cartel members and they'll stop. They argue that once the cartels understand the cost in lives and goods, they will fold. They see force as the one language the cartels understand. That view has pushed U.S. leaders to consider more direct, military-style options than past administrations did. Still, these choices are messy. Calling cartels foreign terrorist groups opens new avenues for action, but it also raises big questions about how far one country can go on another country's soil. Training programs, drone flights, and talk of strikes move the fight into a different zone, one that looks more like a war than a law enforcement campaign. And when warlike tools are used, things can spin quickly and unpredictably. In 2025, when cartel captains whispered about trouble on the water, one name kept coming up: the U.S. Coast Guard cutter James. On a single, relentless 112-day patrol, this ship turned into the kind of headache smugglers dread. The story isn't about one big shootout or a flashy explosion. It's about quiet, steady work done again and again, and the piles of drugs that never made it to shore. The James isn't small. At 418 feet long, it's built to stay at sea for a long time. It sails with a crew of 150 people, sailors trained to track, board, and stop ships moving illegal cargo. They work in teams: drone crews, helicopter pilots, boarding parties, small boat chasers. Each team does a job that the others need. Put them together and they become hard to shake. The run began on January 5th. A drone launched from the James spotted a boat off Ecuador that looked wrong. This drone could stay up for 18 hours and had cameras so sharp they could read writing on a ship from miles away. It didn't scream in and grab the target. It kept quiet, followed, and fed live pictures down to the cutter. When the boarding crew moved in, the team had the full picture. They seized 3 men and more than 2,200 pounds of cocaine. The next day, January 6th, the tempo jumped. A patrol aircraft saw 3 ghost boats moving together, a risky move by traffickers who rarely travel in packs like that. The James launched helicopters fast. In one sweep, the air and sea teams hit all 3 boats. 9 people were arrested, and about 14,000 pounds of cocaine were found across the 3 vessels. It was a big haul, and it showed how fast the cutter's teams could respond when they got a tip. On January 7th, the traffickers tried a stealth trick. They sent out a low-profile boat built to hide from radar. But the James team had learned how to read the sea and its shadows. A helicopter locked onto the vessel, moved in, and shut down its engines with careful precision. The crew boarded, and everyone on board was taken into custody. That single capture kept another 8,240 pounds of cocaine off the streets. By January 18th, the smugglers were getting desperate. In one case, crews started tossing bales of cocaine overboard, hoping the weight drop would let their boat slip away. The James didn't back off. Small, fast boats chased the runners, while other teams raced to scoop the floating bales before they sank. In the end, those quick moves recovered about 6,000 pounds of drugs in just the last 4 months of patrols. Added up, in that stretch, the James removed more than 48,000 pounds of illegal drugs from the ocean. A staggering total. The number hits hard because it shows scale. This isn't a handful of arrests. It's repeated, successful strikes against a flow that otherwise pours into communities. What stands out isn't just the size of the hauls, but the method. The James married long-endurance tech with old-fashioned seamanship. Drones watched for hours, helicopters moved in fast, boarding teams closed the deal, small boats chased and scooped. Each move fit into a plan, and the plan worked over and over. For cartel leaders, the patrol became a new kind of risk. Plans they thought secret were suddenly exposed by eyes in the sky. Boats designed to slip by were picked off. Men who once slipped through gaps in the law now found themselves looking up at Navy-style cutters and trained boarding teams.